Now, the means of production in traditional Africa has been land owned by the extended family system or clans, for example. An economist will tell you that the means of production, factors for production, land, labor, capital, is all being owned by extended family systems. Now, get this, the extended family system is a private entity, separate from the tribal government. And therefore, the means of production in traditional Africa is privately owned, private ownership. The peasants produce food on their own plots of land, and then they take the surpluses to markets to sell. Now, there were markets in Africa before the colonialists came to Africa. Lots of village markets, as well as regional markets. So markets are not something which are foreign to Africans, and that is important. Now, the regional markets that we had in Africa were markets at Timbuktu, for example. Timbuktu, for example, was one great big market town. Salaga, Kano, Mombasa, these were all market towns. And then we also have village markets where foodstuffs were sold. And if you go to any market in West Africa today, you notice that market activity has always been dominated by women. That is a fact. How did this happen? It happened because in traditional Africa, we have what is called sexual division of labor. The cultivation of food crops has always been the avocation of women. And that is why today, about 80% of Africa's peasant farmers are women. Women produce the food crops. Okay? The harvest is used to feed their families. And you notice that the harvest is transported from the farms to the villages by women carrying them on their head. Whatever that they can't carry, they leave them on the farms to rot. So in a way, see, Africa loses something like 30% of its harvest because it can't be transported to the villages, to the homesteads, and also due to spoilage. Now, the surpluses that are sold on markets, African chiefs don't go to the markets and fix prices. Bargaining was the rule. We've always bargained over prices at the markets. And whatever profits the market women make is for theirs to keep, not for the chiefs to seize it from them. As a matter of fact, out of these profits, the market women used that to finance the liberation struggle in the 1950s. So market activity has always been there in Africa. Now, let me also give you a brief description of the political system that was in traditional Africa. Let's say you take a village made up of, say, 10 extended families. Each extended family had a head. And these 10 heads would come together to form a council of elders. Now, the council of elders will choose a chief. In governance, the council of elders and the chief will have to come to unanimous decision on all important decisions in the matters in the village. If they couldn't, then they will call a village meeting and put the issue before the people. And the people will debate the issue back and forth until they come to a consensus. Once a consensus has been reached, then everybody in the village, including the chief, is required to abide by it. Now, I'm stressing this because it is a different form of democracy. It is participatory democracy based upon consensus. You can take democratic decisions in two ways: by majority vote. Majority vote requires you to put an issue, count all those who are in favor, you count them, and then all those opposed, the majority carries. That's fast and quick and easy and transparent. But it has a downside. The downside is that if you take decisions by majority vote, the minority can be ignored. On the other hand, you can take decisions by consensus. Consensus means taking every minority position into account. Once you reach a consensus, then you can be sure that everybody will agree with that decision. But it has a downside. Now, before I tell you about the downside, it's important to notice that the Nobel Peace Committee takes its decisions by consensus. The WTO also takes its decisions by consensus. The downside of taking decisions by consensus is that it is practicable when you have a small group of people. But when you have a large group of people, it is impossible to take a consensus because the process will be long and drawn out. Okay? Which means that, now again, let me emphasize this, that when we go to a country, a continent like Africa, it's always important to make a distinction between the existence of an institution and different forms of the same institution. If we go to Africa and we're looking to a village and we're looking for a mall, for example, you're not going to find it. But then it doesn't mean that Africans have no idea what a market is. Because a mall is a different form of a market. And what they are used to is a village market. It's exactly the same thing. If you go to an African village and you're looking for a box with ballot written on it, you're not going to find it. But then it doesn't mean that they have no idea of what the essence of democracy is. Because theirs is a different form of democracy. It's participatory democracy based upon consensus. The chief that they have is no despot. If they have a bad chief, for example, there are 3 checks against that bad chief. Number 1, the chief comes from a royal family, and if he's terrible, he's tyrannical, he brings shame to the royal family. So there is a queen mother at the royal family whose duty it is to remove that bad chief. Now, if she doesn't, she herself will be removed in some ethnic groups. If that line of defense fails, then the next line of defense is the Council of Elders. Now, remember that the Council of Elders are heads of the various extended families in the village. That's an independent body. The chief can't remove the councillors. If the chief is bad, the councillors will refuse to work with him. Now, if that line of defense fails, the last defense is the people. If the chief is bad and tyrannical and despotic, the people will vote with their feet and abandon the chief. So, in other words, in traditional Africa, a bad chief found out that his people are gone. That is what you might call passive peasant resistance to despotism. And it is happening right now in Zimbabwe. 4 million Zimbabweans have voted with their feet out of the country. The point which I want to emphasize is that the African peasants have a heritage. Now, if we want to help them, okay, then we build or use methods that are consonant with their heritage or with their cultural structures. Again, the reason why I'm emphasizing this is we, the elites of Africa, never did this. We never went back to build upon our own indigenous institutions, which is one reason why Africa is in a mess. We went abroad, even Jupiter, and copied all sorts of foreign systems to impose on the African people. The Soviet Union is a one-party state, so too must Africa. So in post-colonial Africa, a lot of African governments declared their countries to be one-party state systems where one person ran for president and always won 99.99999% of the vote to declare himself president for life. Those were the political systems that we had. And those political systems were totally alien to Africa's own participatory democracy based upon consensus. And then, if you look at the economic system, they also brought alien systems into Africa. As a matter of fact, the development that took place in post-colonial Africa can be described as development by imitation. We just copy things brought blindly. Rome has a basilica, so we build one in Yamoussoukro. American farmers use tractors, so we're also using tractors. New York has skyscrapers, so we build skyscrapers in the middle of nowhere. And then Bokassa said, aha, France once had an emperor. So he spent $25 million to crown himself emperor to show that Africa too has come of age. And then, this hasn't changed. Nigeria says the US has a space center. So Obasanjo is spending $89 million to build Nigeria's first space center. This is a country which can't feed itself, and every year imports $3 billion worth of food. In other words, we never went back to build upon our own indigenous institutions. The continent is littered with the carcasses of all these failed imported foreign systems. And that's why it makes sense for us to go back and build upon our own indigenous institutions. The only African country which did this and doing well is Botswana. Doing very well, it went back. If Botswana can do it, the rest of Africa can do it. And also notice the Asians. The Asians didn't reject their cultural heritage. They built upon it. If you take Japan, for example, Africa is the only continent where we've rejected our own cultural heritage and copied all sorts of alien systems to impose upon Africa. Even the economic ideology. Back in the 1960s, African leaders told us, only socialism will save Africa. Guess what sort of socialism they practice? Swiss bank socialism, which allowed the heads of state to rape and plunder Africa's treasury for deposit in Switzerland. All this now must change. And that's why we need a new paradigm. The new paradigm is the one that starts at the village, because that's where the people are. Now, as I promised, we are involved, the Free Africa Foundation is involved. It's organizing farmers into a cooperative. I have been to many, many, many villages. I've spoken to more than 50 farmer groups. Everywhere, they told me the same thing. They told me that, look, we got plenty of land. We can grow anything. The problem is we don't have buyers. People don't come to buy our produce. And then I said, this will change. Are you willing to organize yourself into a cooperative? If you are willing to organize yourself into a cooperative to produce palm oil, for example, then we'll find you the markets and we'll find you the buyers. Okay? They said yes. And then I told them, all right, sign here. Within 2 weeks, we were able to sign up 2,000 farmers. And as I stand here right now, we've been able to sign up 13,000 peasant farmers into a cooperative to produce palm oil. The palm oil will be exported to Europe. The Europeans, we have European buyers, they will turn that into biodiesel. Profits of the cooperative, part of the profits of the cooperative will go to the traditional government, traditional treasury, where the chief will use part of the proceeds, the profit, to bring electricity to his people, to build clinics for his people, as well as schools and